The phrase is ineffable, that it has no words, it has no definition, so how do you define the indefinable? And yet what I realized was my cognitive mind had wrapped itself around this idea that God is out there, the old man with the beard and the bad attitude. But my soul had always known the connection. And so it was like peeling away the knowledge to the realization of the truth. And that, because I can remember as a little child, we were in the Midwest and they had what they called shelter belts, which were planting of trees that had been put in during the Dust Bowl to stop the wind from blowing off the topsoil. Oh, yeah. And I wasn't supposed to go out there. There could be coyotes, could be whatever, And yet that was always what I wanted to do, would go 4 or 5 trees into the shelter belt and just sit on an old tree trunk or the earth or whatever and just be. And that was where I really felt the closest to, at that time I wouldn't have called it God, but that was where I felt the closest to reality. There's a fabulous little story about a 4-year-old little boy the family's having a new baby. And he is so excited he wants to be alone with the new baby, and the parents are a little bit concerned about leaving a child that age alone with an infant. And what they finally do is set up a monitor and they let the little boy go in to where the crib is, and he slides the chair across and he climbs up on the chair and he goes right into the crib and puts his face in and says, "Remind me about God, I'm starting to forget." We are kind of born knowing this. And the more we're in this world of the finite, the more we forget how limitless we really are. So I do think it's a struggle, and I do think it's, we don't want to disappoint our elders who taught us this new way, but we also don't want to lose who we really are. Ram Dass wrote a fabulous book on how can I help, that I tend to want to impose what I would want as my method of assisting you instead of listening to what is the greatest need for you. And what I think I love about this teaching is that we are taught as ministers and practitioners to see within whoever we're working with the wholeness that's already there, to look past whatever brokenness the world might see, and to see the hero heart, to see within you. You already have all the answers you require. It's up to me. The only way I can help you is by asking you enough questions that you can hear yourself into your own healing. And we forget, that old William Blake, this being human is a remembering and a forgetting. And we remember and everything is so good and we're grounded and our intuition is really working, and then something happens that knocks us sideways and we forget. We don't see the forest. We see the trees, we see the craziness, so we have to pull ourselves back. When I decided to become a minister, I was 10 years into the 12-year ownership of a tavern down in California. And looking back on it, my friends that I still go back to visit sometimes will say, really you had a ministry all along, Linda. You were guiding us in the ways of being in community and guiding us in the ways of doing good in the world, which may sound funny to people who've never been in a bar that is more like a neighbor, more like Cheers than the disco. And but my mom reminded me when I found this teaching and realized just sort of I started in January, and in like May, I had this, holy crap, I'm supposed to be a minister. And it was like a bonk on the side of the head, but it was like suddenly everything that I had done up to that point began to make sense. And my mom said, well, you remember when you were 10 years old, you used to play church. But if you had asked me at 18 or 25 or 30 if this was where I was headed, I would have laughed at you and said, yeah. Because I had fallen away from church at that point in time. From the time I was 18 till I was 43. I didn't lose my relationship with the infinite, but I knew that mainstream Christianity was absolutely not my... Everything that we had been taught was this was to be hated in favor of, after we die there will be heaven. You know, even the way the Genesis was translated was not, you know, what it literally meant was to have stewardship over the earth, and they translated it as dominion. And I totally and completely loved the man Jesus and what he taught and what he stood for. And I really love Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They've been colored, but there's, you know, you go back and you look at the Q document and the things that they think they were drawn from, that I really do believe we have a sense of who this teacher was and what he was trying to teach. Unfortunately, most of my experience in mainstream fundamental religion is calling back to the Old Testament, to the Jewish law, and not really teaching what Jesus was teaching. The Dalai Lama was just laughing because I remembered the other day hearing the Dalai Lama said, you know, Christianity is a really beautiful religion. It would be wonderful if people actually tried it. Progressive, what's being called progressive Christianity, United Church of Christ, the work of Father Richard Rohr, the work of Bishop Spong, and these are moving more in that direction of recapturing the teachings of Jesus instead of worshiping Jesus, trying to follow him. And that's what fascinates me, is I'd rather follow him than worship him. I don't think he intended, you know, even in the stories of what happened with Pilate, is his answer is always, that's what you say I am. He doesn't say I'm this, he just says that's what you say I am. And the translation, when every time he uses the word Father in the translation, the word that he used was Abba. And Abba actually translates as Papa. It completely changes the relationship that he had with the infinite. From this authoritarian father to Papa.
I gotcha.
You know, God is a big, lovey, cuddling, and not because he even wants to put a gender to God. It's just, I think he's trying to explain the closeness. You know, Islam has it that it's as close as your jugular. God is as close as the vein in your neck. God is within us and grounded in us. And whenever I say I'm not enough, if we look at Moses saying, tell them I am has sent you. Tell them the I am that I am that I am. Every time we use the word I am, we're calling the name of God. And when I say I'm not enough, which I have a tendency to do, I'm calling God not enough. Because God is what I am. You know,
So you're not seeing any division between self and God?
Essentially, the division lies in our ego. The division lies in our finite. That which we have a full capacity to the infinite. We have the ability. It's here for us. But I kind of liken it to, you know, a little cartoon bubble where there's a thought bubble above somebody's head. We are the point at the end of that little arrow that's tagging down. And we can access the whole bubble, but most of us are spending all of our time in just that little wedge-shaped piece. I studied a lot of Joseph Campbell, who points out that virtually every culture understands that their creation stories are just stories that were used to help understand how things were created, that they're not, you know, there wasn't a literal 7-day, 24-hour period that happened 6,000 years ago, that these are stories that are told to help explain how things came to be. And Jesus is one of dozens and dozens of virgin births, which were inserted into stories to let people know that this was a really special person. He wasn't your ordinary average birth. He was, and I believe the whole concept of the resurrection is meant to be a metaphor because nobody recognized him. You know, in the story, nobody knew it was him at first. You know, they didn't. You know, and how would you not recognize somebody if he was standing there fully resurrected? That it's the idea of the idea never dies. The truth never dies. Brother Lawrence, who couldn't do anything else in the monastery. They put him in the kitchen and he washed dishes. And he created a spiritual practice of washing the pots and pans. That became his practice because he was fully present to it. And so that's the purpose of practice, is that we just become fully present. And so in the moments when we get knocked off the trail, we work to remember that the trail is still there. It never went away. We're the ones who stepped off of it, because your mind, grabbing on to the current experience, will try to convince you that that's what's true, rather than the timelessness. This is our teaching goes a long way into the whole idea. There is all that is, and then there's our current experience, who is still, it is still God, but it's God in its changeable form. So no matter what my experience is right now, my experience can throw me off balance, but it's still all God and it's still all there with me. But I have forgotten. Seek first all that is good, and then everything will be added to you. If I'm in here looking at all the evidence of why my life isn't perfect, I will just call up and be basically praying for more levels of imperfection. Because whatever I focus on with clarity and passion becomes my prayer. And the infinite, in its automatic response, will give me, because the infinite believes that whatever I'm focused on and talking about is what I really like to see happen.
So the infinite is not having any judgment whatsoever.
It says, oh, you want to do that? Okay. If you sit here and say, I'm so stupid, I will never be able to figure this out. I don't know what wants to happen here. Oh my God, all is lost. The infinite will respond. It believes everything we say. The infinite is with us through every trial, but it doesn't operate as the cavalry and stop the bad from happening. It's just there to help us get through it and to the other side of it. Believing in religious science does not mean nothing bad will ever happen to you. It simply means that when it does, you'll be equipped to handle it much better, and you won't get thrown into a tailspin so easily and so readily. But we have to realize that we're the ones who put ourselves in bondage, and then we can get ourselves out. You know, one of my sayings is, the bad news is you're responsible for the mess you're in.
Right.
The good news is you're responsible for the mess you're in.
Right.
Because if you made it, you can unmake it. It isn't the universe hurling stones at you. That was the teaching of Jesus. He never said, I've healed you. He never said, God healed you. He said, your faith healed you. You healed you. And it doesn't matter whether I'm in this faith or any other faith. The world will respond to me as a giant mirror of what it is I believe. It is done unto us as we believe. It's not done unto us as we really, really, really would like it to be. It's done unto us as we believe. And if I believe, no matter how hard I work at this, that life is hard, if I believe that money doesn't grow on trees, if I believe that it's going to be a struggle, then it will respond by being that for me. God doesn't know when we're joking. Takes us literally at everything we say. If I make a joke about how horrible women are or men are or whatever, the universe will say, well, okay.